So how many ways are there to sharpen a chisel? Well, how many woodworkers are there? How many professional woodworkers are there? How many ideas, opinions, styles are there? That's how many ways there are to sharpen a chisel. So I have my methods I've gleaned and I've learned over the years. This is the way that it works for me. These are the things that I do in order to sharpen my hand chisels to get the best cuts when I'm trying to pare away small amounts of woods on any of the projects that I work on. Now, do you hollow grind or do you flat grind? How many opinions are there? How many woodworkers are there? How many professional woodworkers, amateur woodworkers? I hollow grind. Now what the hollow grind does, it's not a secret method. It doesn't make it better than any other way. Hollow grinding simply puts a small grind or a small curve in the center of the thickness of the chisel from the top of the chisel to the cutting edge or the base of the chisel. I use it because it allows me to focus all of my attention on that last eighth of an inch of surface between the center of the bevel and the edge that cuts. I'm not having to surface or hone the entire thickness of the bevel itself. Other people will tell you that you get a much finer edge, a much finer cut, flat honing the entire length of the bevel. Okay, go ahead and do it. It's all right by me. You get no real improvement in the ability of this thing to cut by doing it one way or the other. It simply makes it quicker to do the honing. And here's the nice thing about it. Each time you go back and re-hone, you simply hone that edge sharp again. And then when that hollow grind is gone, that simply means you've gone as far down into the grind as you can, or far down into the angle surface of the chisel that you can. Then you go back over to the grinder and you put in another hollow grind and start the process all over again. I mentioned in the previous video that I use this honing jig. This honing jig is made by Veritas, specifically to be used on chisels and hand plane blades, and it works really well. What it does is it gives you the tools that you need in order to get the angle of the blade correct for the type of cutting that you're doing. Now I typically use a 20-degree bevel. And based on the width of the plane, this part of the jig allows me to get not only the center line of the chisel to the jig itself, but it also allows me, by using the marks that they have on the jig, to get the right bevel angle, so I can repeat it each time I put the plane or the chisel in the jig. A lot of woodworkers will tell you that they use a 1/4 inch plate glass base to get the finest, flattest surface that you can. I don't do it that way. Traditionally, I've always sharpened it on the surface of the cast iron surface on my table saw. A few videos back, I brought home this 1940s era surface plate, inspection plate. This thing is dead flat. I showed you that in that video. So I'm going to use the surface plate to get the first grind on my chisel. Now again, I've told you I've spent a lot of time studying this, reading the books, trying to understand what's the best method that works for me. And what I learned years ago is that if you take a piece of 180 or 150 sandpaper on that flat surface, that plate glass, or in this case my granite surface, the sandpaper removes material a lot faster than does the hones. We're going to finish with the hones, but we're going to start with the sandpaper. Now I need to keep the sandpaper in place so that it's not moving around while I'm honing the blade. So I'm using these woodworking clamps. I'm stretching this out as tight and flat as I can. And then I'm going to take the hone and I'm going to put the hone on that sandpaper. If you watch any of my other videos where I polish metal, you'll know that I always use some WD-40. Getting that sprayed all over the table. In order to lubricate the surface that I'm grinding, but it also helps to carry away a lot of the contaminants. Big believer in this. Been using this method for 30 years. And again, how many ways are there to polish a piece of metal? How many guys in the trade are there? So as I said, that removes a lot of material in a hurry. And what I like to do is take a magic marker and mark that edge. And that gives me a good clear signal where the jig is set and where I'm actually grinding material. And in this case, we are pretty much on that edge. So we're going to just keep doing this until we've got a nice flat honed edge that goes right down to the cutting edge itself. Another way to think about adding the oil to the sandpaper when I'm polishing, think about if you're into automobiles or cars, think about how they wet sand that paint after they've got it on. You're not going to use just dry sandpaper when you go and sand down or color sand the paint job on your car. You're going to do a wet sand, and it's the same idea, same concept. One of the things about using this jig is you need to be aware and careful that you're putting all of your pressure down on the tip and holding that constant pressure, and you're not varying it too much, because it is possible to begin to rock that blade as you're sanding or honing. And I can already see that I got a little bit of a curve in this from the last time that I honed it, because I have marker showing on each corner. This hone, by the way, it has a follow wheel on the bottom. What the jig does is it allows me to hold a steady angle, whereas opposed to freehanding it when you have the ability to kind of rock your hands as you're doing it. I've never been able to get that level of control so that I don't get a rocking motion and a nice flat or straight edge. Alright, we've got a nice flat bevel across the entire length of the edge. So we're ready to move on to the next phase in this. Alright, this is already starting to get a nice sharp edge. Matter of fact, that hurt. The next thing I'm going to do is wet hone the blade. And I'm going to put a towel on top of my surface plate because I don't want the water to get all over that cast iron and rust it. And I used to do the same thing when I did it on my table saw. So, one thing about these wet hones is they need to be wet. You always keep them in a container that's full of water so that they're always wet and they're always maintaining that dampness. Because otherwise, if you try to just add water to it, then the water itself is simply going to evaporate. I don't know what size this is, I forget. But this is the first step, and then I have a second hone. There's a finer hone. So we're going to repeat the process, repeat what we were doing on the sandpaper. And I am going to color the blade again, just to verify that I have a nice contact across the entire thing, which I do. And again, the reason that I use the towel is because I have to keep adding back water. Now, one thing about these stones, if you stick in one area, if you stay in the middle, you're going to end up adding in a curve, which you don't want to do. So you keep, or I keep, working my way across the entire width of the stone. When I put the stone back in the water, I'm going to flip it over so that the next time I use it, I use the opposite side. That way I keep the wear to a minimum, and I'm spreading that wear on both sides of the stone. And if you can watch the stone, if you can see it, then you can actually watch it evaporate. I do try to keep it saturated. I'm working my way from left to right. Now you can actually hear the change in sound when that water begins to evaporate off the honed surface, or the honing surface. Alright, so we're done with the coarser hone. Again, I'm going to roll it over, put it back down in the water. Now I have a cover for this. It's a locking cover. It has these blue seals around the edge. This is actually something that you would use in your home kitchen. They just work really well for woodworkers too. Now the fine stone, it is a wet stone, but it's not a wet stone to the effect that it sits in water, absorbing the water all the time. So you're simply going to use the water to lubricate the stone and the blade. I try to add it in a little bit at a time, try to keep it wet if I can. I'm using distilled water here in this case. Trying to do that. Same thing, we're going to do this all over again. And you should be able to hear the difference in the sound. It's very quiet. Now this particular stone doesn't evaporate the water or absorb the water like the other one did, so it'll actually stay wet much longer. One of the features that I like on this Veritas jig is it has the ability to turn this knob, which rolls this roller and allows you to put a micro bevel on. Micro bevel is simply, it adds a 1 degree additional bevel at the very tip of the blade or the chisel, which allows a much sharper cutting angle, but only at that very, very end. So simply by twisting that one notch, we add that micro bevel. Now the bevel is actually so small and tiny you almost can't even see it, but it is there. Let's get a piece of wood and see how good this thing does. That's what we like to see, that nice curl coming off, which means the edge is not breaking the chip, it's actually slicing the chip. That's what we want. And we want to be able to use it in either direction. And you can see, even from this direction, I'm able to get a nice cut. I'm happy with the way this came out. It's really sharp. Now I'm ready and able to go in and start to cut away this block of wood that we put in on this Stevens favorite. So I know I'm going to get some good cuts. I'm going to pare that wood away without risking damaging anything or chipping anything. And it's one of the things that every woodworker who's serious about doing this kind of work needs to do, is to have a good set of chisels, but especially a good sharp set of chisels. If you guys enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Consider going over to my Patreon page and supporting me over there. Every little bit helps support the channel, helps support the expense for building these videos, making this content for you. Also, don't be afraid if anything I've given you in any one video is useful to you to go for that super thanks. $1, $2, $5, any contribution over there would be appreciated as well. Thanks for being here, guys, and I will see you in the next video where we do this repair on that Stevens favorite. See you guys later.